Hello! Right, so I'm doing something a bit different from the usual Let's Play videos. Myself and Mr. Black will shortly be undertaking the mammoth task of working our way through the Legacy of Kain games. Hopefully, if we get it sorted, starting with the slightly dated top-down beauty that is Blood Legacy of Kain. With him playing that, and then we'll have Mr. Black also playing through Soul Reaver 1 and 2, followed by myself playing through Blood Omen 2 and Legacy of Kain Defiance. If you've never seen the series or played the series before, I heartily recommend you give it a try, especially before you jump into the newly released Nosgoth multiplayer. Kind of plays about with the original stories and then further and further into something new, I suppose. There's quite a few alterations to various vampire breeds that were created in the early games, but this is more about the games that never happened. Now, I've been reading an article recently on Nosgoth that I will link at the bottom that gives a lot more information than I will be able to in this, by Mama Robotnik. Full shout out. Because the amount of research that's gone into this is obscene. Now, there are apparently 10 cancelled games. Now, not all of them are officially Legacy of Kain games, but nonetheless, quite interesting. And you'll see some screenshots and a few video clips if I can find them on the video you can see in front of you. So the first one, 2 years before Blood Omen Legacy of Kain came out, a game called Perils of Nosgoth. Now, you'll see from the artwork that it was pretty much the intro sequence to Kain. There's a beautiful photo you can see there of the pillars with the circle of the 9, and then Mr. Kain stood with the sword, stabbed through him just before he turns into a vampire. Now, this was coming out for the 3DO, and it was pretty much going to be this amazingly adult game, with screenplay cinematics, and not really much detail on the in-game, but it was going to be, Kain was going to be modelled after Clint Eastwood's character in Unforgiven. There were no good and evil characters, they were all quite grey and down the middle, and it was to put the players in the position where everybody believes that you're evil, even yourself while you're playing it, but not quite sure. There was no sort of ultimate weapons or anything like that. It was all down to player reflex, and it was sent to Crystal Dynamics. Crystal Dynamics from Silicon Knights, and they were like, "This is awesome," and then never ever touched it. But it looks incredible. Like, it's all hand painted and hand drawn artwork, and it looks, you can see the bare bones of the original Blood Omen here. And I'm quite gutted that we'll never ever get to play it. It's one of those things that you will never ever see ever again. But it was going to come out 94 and on the 3DO, a console that nobody ever really bought. And then they gave up on it. And then they made Blood Omen and stole all its ideas and created this phenomenal top-down game for the PlayStation 2 and the PC. Sorry, PlayStation 1 and the PC in 96. Now, speaking of that was also meant to come out for the Saturn in a much prettier form than the PlayStation 1 version on the PC. Got rid of the horrendous loading times. It was a very, very laggy game. You can still pick it up on the PlayStation Store. I believe it's $3.99 from the PlayStation Store for your PS3 and your Vita and even the PSP. And it's still, to this day, it's a wonderful game. You'll see me and Paul play it, because it's one of my favourite games of all time. But it's an absolute joy to play. It's just very, very laggy. And they remade it for the Saturn, ready to come out, and it never appeared. Apparently, there's rumours about that it was 100% complete, and nobody really wanted it. Pretty much they kind of bottled the whole thing because the Saturn wasn't selling too well. So they never released it. But you'll see from the screenshots there's some nice, it looks a little sharper than the PlayStation version, and there's that nice veil going over the top of Kain's head on the side, and it's just not as laggy. But it's nonetheless, it looks like if there is a 75% complete version out there that may be huntable, but I'm not quite sure if you'll ever get to play it. But definitely worth a look-see nonetheless. So next up, we've got a game called Sirens. Now, Sirens was created by Steve Ross, one of the lead artists and writers of Blood Omen 2. Now, this was pretty much it was cancelled in 97. Not sure when they started making it. But there's a lot of things from this that did go into the Blood Omen series. Primarily, the Sirens race became the Hilden in the Blood Omen games. And a lot of their area went into Blood Omen itself. Like similar imagery, it's pretty much the Hilden City is exactly how they designed the Sirens game. And they'd stole a lot from it. Pretty much took a lot out. But there is another game later in the list that Blood Omen 2 also steals from. Come to that when we get there, but it's quite interesting to see how much they've actually taken from one story, especially when they get halfway through developing it and the company turn around and go, right, we need you to we want you to change this, we want you to cancel it, and then going back to it years later and pulling it for something else, which is really cool. So next on the list were officially Legacy of Kain 2, one made by Crystal Dynamics and one made by Silicon Knights. Now, apparently there was a bit of hostility between Silicon Knights and Crystal Dynamics, so much so that the police had to be called in. I will also link that article on the bottom of this. But because Activision were like, well, this is selling, we want another game, they approached Crystal Dynamics. And Activision were like, well, sack that, it's not good enough for us. So they then went to Silicon Knights and went, please make us Blood Omen 2, because it's your guys. They started work on the game, and Crystal Dynamics apparently tried to disrupt the progress of it, and in the end, they pretty much went, no. So yeah, they didn't progress very far with them. The only thing known about Crystal Dynamics Kain 2 is that it was not Soul Reaver. Regarding Silicon Knights Kain 2, it could have took the form of a prequel starring the character Vorador, because he was very popular during the first. Now, they never really got out of the studio. There is no leaked pictures. Nobody's ever discussed it, to be honest. We just know that it was in progress through the couple of contracts that have been seen. Now, the next one on the list, number 6, is a game called Shifter. Now, if you have a look at this image here, you may see that he represents pretty much Raziel from Soul Reaver. It was a game with an angelic theme where you shifted between two planes to complete the game. The protagonist was essentially a fallen angel of death, a reaper of souls hunted by his former brethren, now driven to expose and destroy the false gods they all served. The hero was an undead creature able to shift between the spectral and material realms and glide on the tattered remains of wing-like coattails. Now that is definitely Raziel in its entire description. Now, they got quite far into the designs of this, as you'll see from the pictures. We're not sure how far it got before the cancellation, but there was some quite a lot of artwork put together for it. And apparently Crystal Dynamics just didn't have the confidence that the game would do well. So halfway through the development cycle, they went, right, we want this as a Legacy of Kain game, and made the main character Raziel, and gave him the Soul Reaver, and went on to call it Soul Reaver. Now, apparently, a lady called Amy Hennings states that Eidos ordered Shifter to be cancelled in its conceptual stages, and the concept to be made into the Legacy of Kain game. They were asked to adapt the concept into a sequel to Blood Omen, and they had to merge everything into the mythos that was Legacy of Kain. Don't get me wrong, it's nice to see that it was another game, but I'm so glad that this became Soul Reaver. I think if they left it as just a another title, it would have been wonderful, but to have it bring into that universe that I loved so much was even better. It was pretty much the basis of what became one of the most ambitious games of all time. Like, there's so much about Soul Reaver that is left unfinished, and was left unfinished at the time because they reached the restraints of the machine, or they got overexcited and tried to put something else in and then took it out at the last minute. That it was phenomenal, and I'm really glad that sold so well and got a sequel. So then you move on to Soul Reaver 2. So this turned into Soul Reaver, and then we got Soul Reaver 2. Now, Soul Reaver 2 was originally going to be PS1 and Dreamcast. Thankfully, it wasn't. You'll see the screenshots. It looks very much like Soul Reaver 1. Very, very, very PS1 graphics. Phenomenal game, but obviously, again, the game that became Soul Reaver 2 is so much prettier and so much more beautiful. It got cancelled very shortly into it. I believe they were doing it towards the end of the PS1 life cycle and just kind of went, no, we'll stop, we'll create a new engine, and we'll go from the ground up and make the PS2 game. Now, it was going to come out on the Dreamcast as well, obviously with the updated graphics set, but it never materialised. But it was pretty much new enough, indistinguishable from the PS2 release. But yes, it's an absolutely stunning game. Now, we have a game called Chakan 2. I think I've pronounced that right, on the Dreamcast. Now, I've never played the original, so I can't tell you much about it. Apparently, it was a Mega Drive game, and then they were bringing this out on the Dreamcast, and they cancelled it. But this is the other game I mentioned that would sit in the sort of lock-in with Blood Omen 2, along with Sirens before. One of the allies of Chakan, seen in the screenshot that's up now, a woman called the Worm Rider, is very, very, very much Kain's ally in Blood Omen 2, the Vampire Uma. Now, there's a lot of this that's fairly similar. They've taken a hell of a lot. Like you'll see from these other screenshots, these monsters have pretty much became bad guys in Blood Omen, or even vampires in Blood Omen, main characters. And it's exactly the same with Sirens, where they took an entire race and put them into this other universe, and it worked brilliantly. So yeah, there's quite a few sort of, I don't know, similarities between the two or the three, and bringing them in all into the Blood Omen game, and it works really well. We'll get to Blood Omen 2 at a certain point when we start doing the videos themselves, but it's not the best of the Kain games, but still I believe quite strongly that it's a big part of the storyline, despite a lot of people kind of writing it off. But yeah, it was quite nice to see that there was a lot of influence into Blood Omen 2. Now, there was 2 more games that never ever got anywhere. There was Legacy of Kain, The Dark Prophecy, which was a PlayStation 2, and it was cancelled in 2004. This was Ritual Entertainment with Crystal Dynamics, and this was essentially the follow-on to Defiance, the final game in the series. This was pretty much what they wanted to follow it up with, and again, Amy Hennig was the lead writer and the producer of the Soul Reaver games and Defiance, and left for Naughty Dog. And when she did, it seemed to just kind of trickle out of existence, from what I can tell. Ritual definitely put a lot of work into it, as you can see from the screenshots, but it never ever quite got anywhere. I believe, if I just go a little further down, it was 4 months. After 4 months it got cancelled. So yeah, 4 months, and it's taken 9 years for any of this stuff to become public. And there is a lot of screenshots. I'll link quite a few in here, but again, go and read the original article because it's a wonderful read. And this was essentially post the end of Defiance, and in fact, even post Soul Reaver. Kain would have returned as young and old, and Raziel would have returned as well. Even Ariel, and it would have, the Seer. There's a lot of character return. It's kind of, I think it was going to be the grand finale of the whole story, from what I can gather. Again, I'm just going to post up some screenshots. I'm not going to go massively into it because I don't want to steal the credit from Mama Robotnik, because she's put a lot of work into this article and done a lot of hunting about. And it's a beautiful read as well. It's so well written. But they go massively into what would happen post Defiance, especially after all the time changes, and it would definitely wrap up all the loose ends that Blood Omen 2 and Defiance tried to, well, Blood Omen 2 created and Defiance tried to rectify. Now, finally, there's been a lot of information appearing on the Tinderwebs recently about a game called Legacy of Kain, Dead Son. Now, this is essentially what got me back into the idea of playing the Kain games, because it's been so long. It's been, I don't know, first one would have been about 7 months ago, I suppose, from start to finish. Until I do the videos, it'll be about 10 years since I've played Soul Reaver 1 and Soul Reaver 2, and probably a little bit less than that for Blood Omen, and it got me 10 years. It's got to be a little bit less than that for all of them. But yeah, it's been a long time, and they're one of those things that I always read up on. And if I see something, I get excited and try and play through them again. Never really have time. But Dead Son, it looked phenomenal. It looks like it's stolen a lot of stuff from Assassin's Creed, especially considering it was cancelled in 2012 and had about 3 years pre-development before then. It's Unreal 3 engine, PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, PC, and PS4, apparently, it was coming out for, where Climax Studios did the single player, and Synoxix did the multiplayer. Now, you will have seen the multiplayer, and if you're a Kain fan and have seen Nosgoth, you'll have played the multiplayer that got taken from this, but they never made the single player game. Now, the game itself, you play a now dead human in what looks to be a Reaver of Souls body, with him as a human next to you, in his own body, kind of ghosting and being generally the tutorial part of it, I suppose, pushing the story forward. But it looks brilliant. It very much the Soul Reaver sort of cross between realms, and there's a very good video. I'll put a clip of it in, but I won't play the whole thing because it's about half an hour, of the world and the storyline and what's caused it to happen. And it's set about 1500 years after Kain, so the human race is kind of coming back to a sort of decent level after the raping that Kain and Raziel gave it. Apparently, yeah, it's set in Nosgoth's future. It's a distant continuation of the series, so kind of think Star Trek The Next Generation, Star Trek, same universe but not the same thing. There is a race of blue-skinned vampires living in this era, known as the Sirens. The vampires have evolved beyond those seen in the series probably, and have the ability to shift as well between realms. These vampires are devoutly religious. Let's have a look. The guy who attacks you is called Gain. He's one of these Saradan vampires, and he attacks a human of Nosgoth called Asher. And Asher becomes part of Gain. And it just looks stunning, and I'm absolutely gutted that this never came out. It looks apparently influenced a lot, obviously, by Soul Reaver and the Legend of Zelda games, which would be amazing. Even the artwork looks fantastic. There's a load of stuff I'm going to link for this because it looks awesome. I do keep saying that, but really, I'm devastated that this will never ever come out, because it's one of those games that that surely should be given the light of day. I think the Kain series doesn't get enough credit for what it did. 4-game series, Soul Reaver itself being one of the most ambitious games that ever came out. Like there were walled off areas and corridors that just ended and ledges out of reach because they started designing bits of the game and decided to cut it all out. There's another article I will link because it's written by the fantastic Mama Robotnik, who I will give all the credit for this, that tells you exactly what was cut from Soul Reaver and exactly what isn't. But I'm looking through this article and there's like half a game just missing from it. And it should be there. Why is this not here? But yes, we'll come to that when we get through Soul Reaver. We've still got the first Blood Omen to do, and that's going to take Paul a while, because I don't think he's ever played it, but it'll be interesting to see how he does on it. But yes, that's it really. So, thank you for listening to me rant, and try and explain my joy for this series of games that seems to get woefully underrated and has done a hell of a lot for the series. But yes, thank you again to Mama Robotnik. The articles have been phenomenal. You've done a lot more research than I could even get into. I did try and look into this and just kind of got a bit lost off and distracted, but that's what happens when you try and do these things at work. But yes, come and see me and Paul play this very, very shortly. Once we get the capture card working on the PS1, we will be blasting through the first Blood Omen, and then we'll be jumping to the PC versions of Soul Reaver 2, Defiance, and Blood Omen 2, and we will be playing them in order. We won't be missing anything else, so hopefully you'll enjoy it, and hopefully we won't suck too much at them, so that we pretty much screwed out for years. But thank you for your time, take care, and I will see you soon.